Hey friend, please subscribe. 1 second for you, big deal for me. I woke up on my 18th birthday thinking maybe Frank would toss a cheap steak on the grill. Maybe Margaret would pull out one of those store cakes with the hard icing. Nothing fancy, just something. The house was quiet. No smell of coffee. No game show blasting from the kitchen TV. Just that tight, dead silence that made the walls feel closer than they should have been. Frank was already on the couch when I walked in, elbows on his knees like he was waiting on a punishment to deliver. Margaret was in the recliner across from him, eyes glued to the carpet like it held answers. Sit down, Frank said, using the same voice he used when I dented the mower or left the back gate open. I didn't sit right away. I looked around for anything normal. No balloons, no card, not even a dumb joke. Just them waiting. So, I sat. Margaret didn't look at me when she said it. You were adopted. I took you in when you were too small. No build-up, no warning. Like she was reading off a receipt. Frank didn't blink. You're grown now. Time to stand on your own 2 feet. That was it. No questions. No. How are you feeling? Just a cold dropkick wrapped in legal ease. Before we start, tell us which city or country you're listening from. Let's see which corners of the world we've gathered from today. Thanks. And now the story. I didn't blow up. I didn't cry. That was the thing about growing up in a house where you kept everything tight in your gut. You learned not to react. I just nodded. Okay. Then I stood up. I went straight to my room. Didn't say another word. My hands moved on their own. 3 shirts, 2 pairs of jeans, a hoodie, my old ball cap from Grandpa George, and the little photo of me on the Ferris wheel when I was maybe 7. I tossed it all into my backpack. Frank's gift clicked into place then. The new battery in my Honda Civic. He'd installed it 2 days ago without a word. I thought it was weird. It wasn't a favor. It was a setup. The last push out the door. I had $75 in cash. A prepaid flip phone with 10 contacts. That Civic I'd worked all last summer for. Paid $5,000. Clean title. Probably worth half that. A buddy would tell me later I got ripped off. 20 minutes. That's how long it took to leave my entire life behind. At the door, I turned around once just to see if they'd look up. If they'd say anything. Margaret still wouldn't meet my eyes. Frank just kept staring at the blank TV screen like I wasn't standing there with a backpack full of cheap clothes and 0 plans. I said, thanks. Not sarcastic, not angry. Just thanks. Then I opened the door and walked out. Didn't slam it. Didn't leave a mess. I figured if they wanted a clean exit, I'd give it to them. I didn't look back at the house. Didn't need to. The second the Civic hit the edge of town, my hands stopped shaking, but my stomach was in knots and my mouth was dry as paper. I pulled onto the shoulder right before Oak Valley and stared at my phone like it might bite me. 10 names. That's all I had in my contacts. I scrolled past coworkers I barely talked to, past some old classmates who'd only invite me if they needed a ride. Then I stopped on George. Last name none. Just George. I hadn't seen him in 3 years. Margaret made that choice easy by cutting him off completely after some fight I wasn't even part of. I stared at his name until my thumb hurt from pressing too hard. Then I hit call. He picked up on the second ring. Ryder, happy birthday. Kid. I didn't even say hi. I just said they kicked me out. He didn't hesitate. Not even a pause. Get here. That was it. That one line did something I hadn't felt in hours. It stopped the spinning. I made it to George's by late afternoon. His single wide sat behind an old bait shop off a gravel road with more potholes than pavement. There were geraniums and busted coffee cans lined up along the porch rail, a country station humming through the screen door, and the smell of bacon grease hanging in the air like it never really left. George stepped out before I even turned off the car. He walked straight to me, arms open, and hugged me like I was still 10. He didn't say anything big or emotional, just patted my back twice and muttered, "You aren't alone. Not today, not ever." I believed him, and that's not something I say lightly. Inside, everything looked the same. Ugly brown couch, paper calendar on the fridge, a table that wobbled if you leaned too hard. We ate meatloaf and instant potatoes off chipped plates, while George told me the part Margaret never would. She bragged about it once. He said, chewing slow, said adopting you made sense on paper. Monthly checks came like clockwork. Said it helped keep the lights on. I kept chewing, but my jaw went tight. "Those checks stop when you turn 18, he said, tapping the table twice like it was gospel. So, she stopped. Too. I didn't cry, not in front of him, but something inside me cracked right down the middle. I think a part of me always knew, just didn't want to believe it until someone said it out loud. She was real smug about it, he added, scraping his fork across his plate. Made it sound like business. I nodded once and stared at my food. I couldn't finish it. After dinner, George didn't say anything about plans or how long I could stay. He just fluffed up the couch, tossed me a clean blanket, and said, "You're home now, kid. Rest." That couch wasn't comfortable. Springs poked my ribs, and the armrest smelled like old chewing tobacco. But I slept like I'd run 25 miles. The trucks on County 15 rolled by all night, and I laid there thinking about Frank's battery gift, Margaret's dead eyes, and the quiet that had followed me out of that house. Next morning, I found George already up, coffee in one hand, an old red toolbox in the other. He set it on the kitchen table and slid it toward me. "You want clean money," he said. "You make it with your hands. That's the rule." I opened the lid. Ratchet sets, socket wrenches, old screwdrivers with worn handles. It smelled like oil and pine sawdust and something else I couldn't name but trusted. "You'll need these," he added, sipping his coffee. I didn't argue. Didn't know what I was doing yet, but I knew I wanted it to be real. Earned, not handed. I found a half-used spiral notebook in his junk drawer and wrote my first list on the back of an old phone bill. Get job, find bed, not shaped like couch. Don't call Margaret, no dumb risks. I underlined that last one 3 times. Dumb risks were Frank's thing. Half-finished ideas and quick money plans that always blew up by payday. George didn't preach. He wasn't the kind of guy who gave long talks about turning your life around or God's plan. All he said before heading outside was, "You'll work. You'll keep your head. You'll be fine." That was church enough for me. He let me borrow his truck later that day, and I drove it into town with my backpack still packed. I walked up and down Main Street, hitting every diner, gas station, and shop with a help wanted sign. Most told me to apply online. One lady at a liquor store laughed and said, "You 18 good. But we don't hire runaways." I ended up back at George's place with nothing but sweat and 2 blisters on my heel. He didn't ask how it went, just slid a cold root beer across the table and changed the radio station to old school country. That night, I stared at my notebook again and wrote 2 more lines under the first 4. Don't quit. Keep it small, but keep moving. That became the rule. Keep moving. even if it's slow, even if nobody's watching. I added a line to the notebook the next morning. Take whatever pays first. That's how I ended up at Rita's Diner off Highway 9, working the 5 a.m. shift before most people wiped the sleep out of their eyes. The kitchen was a furnace. I ran the flat top, cracked eggs till my wrists ached, flipped bacon with a speed that made the line cook nod at me like I'd passed some unspoken test. By sunrise, I had grease under my nails and a half-soaked shirt. The pay wasn't great, but the tips, those went straight into a rinsed-out Folgers can under George's sink. I didn't touch it. Not for gas, not for food. After 4 weeks, I had $500 and a back that screamed every time I bent too fast. On my way to work each morning, I kept passing this run-down blue bungalow with city stickers slapped all over the door. Fines, violations, something about pest control, taped right there in weather-warped plastic sleeves. The lawn looked like it hadn't been touched in years. Weeds up to my knees, just walking past the curb. One morning, a cop I knew from the diner, Officer Ramirez, black coffee, no cream, always tipped in quarters, pulled into the lot while I was dragging out the trash. I asked about the place. Guy skipped town. He said, lighting a cigarette. Owes the city a small fortune. They're done being patient. It sat on my mind all shift. A house that nobody wanted. A wreck. Yeah, but maybe something more. After work. I drove by again and finally noticed the for sale by owner sign half faded in the front window. I called the number expecting it to be disconnected or led to voicemail hell, but someone picked up. Leo, the voice said like he was sick of hearing his own name. I told him I was calling about the house. You got cash or just questions? He snapped. I've got a little, I said. Mostly questions. He sighed hard enough I could hear it through the phone. 200,000, he said. Take it or leave it. I'm tired of the damn thing. It was like he wanted to sell the place the same way people throw out old tires. Just get it gone. I didn't even haggle. We agreed to meet the next day. The inside was worse than I expected. Smelled like wet carpet and sour milk. Mold on the ceiling. Kitchen cabinets falling off their hinges. But I could see it under the grime and cigarette stains. There was something solid. Bone-deep solid. I scraped everything I had. The Folgers can, 150 that George slipped me when he thought I wasn't looking. Even sold the Xbox I brought in the Civic. I was still short, so I hit up a local credit union. The lady behind the desk looked at me like I was trying to scam her, asking questions like I was trying to finance a mansion instead of a moldy shoebox. What do you plan to do with the property? She asked, pen tapping the desk. Live in it, I said. Fix it up. She sighed like she'd heard that one before. But the loan came through, small and ugly, with strings tied to every corner, but enough to close the deal. Nights I'd scrub the place till the water ran black. I wore a rag over my face like I was robbing the place. Tore out the carpets with a crowbar and a prayer. Hauled broken blinds, crusty ceiling tiles, and God knows what from the basement into a pile that took 4 dump runs to clear. I watched YouTube videos on George's cracked phone to learn how to patch drywall, caulk windows, and reseat a toilet that gurgled like it was possessed. Saturdays, George came by with his old paintbrushes and helped me tackle the trim. He never made a big deal about it, just showed up with a thermos of black coffee and said, "What's the plan, boss?" While we worked, he'd talk about my mom, not Margaret, the one before her. Said she was sharp when she was young, laughed easy. She had it in her to be better, he said once, painting the windowsill, but life leaned on her too hard. I didn't ask for more. just kept sanding. I slept on the living room floor for weeks, rolled up in a flannel blanket like a burrito. My pillow was a rolled-up hoodie. I used a shop light for a lamp and ate canned peaches straight from the tin with a plastic fork. It felt weirdly good, like I'd earned the right to be that tired. By the end of the 4th month, the place didn't smell like mildew anymore. Fresh paint covered the water stains. The floorboards stopped squeaking. I even put in a working lock on the front door and changed the busted mailbox. That's when I noticed folks walking their dogs had started slowing down when they passed. Just a second or two longer. Heads turning toward the porch. I didn't flip it. I didn't sell. I moved in. I moved George in too. Gave him the biggest bedroom. The one that caught morning sun. Said he could stay as long as he wanted. He didn't say thank you. He just nodded and said, "Might put my recliner in there." I parked the Civic out front like it was a damn trophy. That night, I stood in the living room barefoot on the floor. I laid myself holding a cold soda and listening to the sound of nothing breaking, nothing yelling, nothing falling apart. I added one last line to the notebook. Make this the last place you start over. I was sweeping the porch one morning when a guy with a golden retriever stopped at the curb and looked the place over. I figured he'd say something about the paint color or ask if I was flipping it. Instead, he nodded toward the siding and said, "What crew did the cleanup on this one?" I wiped my hands on my jeans and said, "Me and my grandpa." He smiled. "No kidding. I've got an auto shop on Elm Street. Place looks like hell. Think you two could do a miracle." I tried not to grin too hard. "What kind of miracle are we talking about, like as in yesterday?" He said. "I didn't have gear, barely had cleaning rags left after finishing the bungalow, but I said yes anyway. You don't wait for perfect. You say yes and figure it out." I went inside and dumped my last 200 on the table. Told George what I was doing. He didn't blink. "Make sure you wear gloves," was all he said. I hit the hardware store hard. Bleach, degreasers, mops, steel wool, scrub brushes, respirators, and one rolling mop bucket that squeaked like a dying mouse when I pushed it. We showed up at the guy's auto shop at 7 the next morning. By sundown, it gleamed. We scrubbed years of black gunk off the floor, power washed the walls, even pulled half the broken fluorescent lights and swapped them for cheap LEDs from a salvage lot. The owner walked the floor, boots echoing. Then he shook my hand. "Got 6 buddies who will want this. I'll give you their numbers if you're serious." I told him I was dead serious. That night, I didn't sleep. I sat on the floor of the living room with the notebook open and wrote the name Spark Clean across the top. No special meaning, just 2 words that sounded sharp. I liked how it looked. Next morning, I walked into a strip mall office and told the clerk I wanted to register a business. She looked me up and down like she thought I was messing with her. "Name of the business?" she asked. "Spark Clean Services." She typed it like it was a dare, then handed me a receipt. Just like that. It was real. By the end of week 3, we'd cleaned a small machine parts warehouse, a dance studio that reeked of sweat and glitter, and 3 dental offices that paid by check and didn't ask too many questions. I needed help. The jobs were stacking faster than I could do them alone. I didn't have time to get picky. I drove through the trailer park near George's bait shop and left notes on 4 doors. One of them belonged to Miguel, who'd done drywall before and didn't care about long hours. The other was Aisha, a single mom with a stare that could burn holes through steel. They didn't want speeches, just asked for clear hours, cash payment, and no drama. "Don't treat me like a favor," Aisha said when she showed up the first day. "I'm not a project. I'm here to work. You do the work, you get paid." I told her, simple as that. We cleaned at night when offices were empty, and the only thing louder than the vacuums was the old Bluetooth speaker Miguel brought that only played 90s hip-hop. I got home at 3, slept till 7, then spent the morning cold calling businesses from a folding chair in the living room with a space heater pointed at my legs. The Civic had a busted exhaust leak and smelled like melted plastic. But I still used it to haul trash bags and mop buckets in the trunk. That's when I met Harlan. He was the city inspector assigned to commercial cleaning and sanitation compliance. Tall, lean, slick hair, fake grin. He acted like he was doing me a favor by showing up late. "Your forms keep getting misfiled," he said the first time. "If you want to fix that, maybe we grab coffee sometime." "Talk priorities," I said. "You can leave the paperwork and I'll handle it." He smiled. "Could make this go faster if we worked something out." I didn't take the bait. I didn't pay him. So every time we sent in a new permit request, it sat and sat and sat. George wasn't surprised. "Keep logs," he told me. "Names, dates, what they say, how they say it. You're not dumb. Just don't act like it." So I bought a black binder. I wrote everything down. Started taping receipts inside, highlighting phone calls, jotting Harlan's exact words in the margins like I was building a case. It made me feel like I was walking into a courtroom instead of a mop job. 4 months in, the Civic died in a rainstorm. Just died. I was 3 blocks from a building in North End, and the dashboard went dark. The steering wheel locked, and it slid like a brick into the gutter. I got out, popped the hood, and the battery cable was corroded so bad it looked like salt crust. I stared at it for a long minute, rain dripping down the back of my neck, hands soaked shirt clinging to me. That's when it hit me. Frank had put that damn battery in back on my birthday. Probably grabbed the cheapest one he could find just to say he helped. I towed the Civic home with George's truck and left it parked sideways in the driveway for a week like a dead animal I didn't want to bury. I'm not trusting anything that man ever touched again. I told George. "You shouldn't have in the first place," he said, not unkindly. I went inside, crossed out the line in my notebook that said, "Use what you've got," and replaced it with, "Only count what's yours." I was scrubbing baseboards in a busted pharmacy downtown, mask on, gloves slick with lemon degreaser, when it hit me. These places weren't just dirty. They were empty. They needed more than mop buckets. They needed people to fill them. So I started asking questions. Who owns this place? Been vacant long? What's the rent? Most landlords didn't want to talk. The ones who did had 2 moods, angry and tired. They didn't care about the backstory. They cared about someone paying rent next month. So I started offering. "I clean it. I'll find someone to lease it. No fee till they sign." I had no license, no suit, no contacts. Just a pen, a clipboard, and the kind of hustle that came from being dead broke and dead certain I wasn't staying there. At night, after we cleaned offices, I'd sit on George's couch with his old laptop and read real estate law until the words blurred. I watched seminars on YouTube, took notes like I was cramming for finals. My second try at the license exam, I passed. Spark Clean still paid the bills barely, but this new thing, Riverside Properties, that felt like a real future. I set it up quiet. Just me and a cheap logo I made on a free app. I didn't even tell George right away. I wanted to hand him a check first. Something real. That's when she walked in. Sarah. Sharp eyes, pulled back hair, clipboard in one hand, and a resume that read like she'd already run 2 companies and could outwork me on 4 hours of sleep. She was interviewing for operations manager at Spark Clean. Said she heard we were growing. Said she didn't want drama, just a job with order. I'm not here for some pitch, she told me, flipping through my schedule notes. I'm here to fix this because it's a mess. She wasn't wrong. I gave her 2 weeks to prove herself. By day 5, she'd reorganized the routes, shifted shift overlaps, and cut our wasted drive time by a third. You should have hired me last year, she said while eating cold tacos in the truck after a long bid run. I didn't know you last year, I said. Your loss. We didn't talk about feelings. We talked gas mileage, supply costs, which brand of gloves ripped the least, and the coffee, always the coffee. Why does it taste like socks? She asked one night, holding up the gas station cup. Because we don't pay more than $2 for it, I said. We laughed at that for a solid minute. It felt good. No pressure, no tiptoeing. Then Harlan came back around. Your floor plans are incomplete, he said, handing back our permit app with the same fake smile. I gave you blueprints and a checklist. I said, you forgot the meeting part, he said, tapping the paper. The let's talk over coffee part. Sarah was across the room watching. When Harlan walked out, she leaned in and said, we're not paying him. He can make this hard. I told her. She didn't flinch. Then start recording calls. I did. 2 days later, my buddy Carlos called. We hadn't talked much since high school, but he'd heard about Spark Clean through a cousin. You know Harlan's not new. He said he's been pulling this stunt for years. I've got a guy who makes problems disappear. Permits, inspections, whatever you need. You pay a cut. Everything moves fast. I didn't answer right away. Just let the words hang. I'm not saying you got to, Carlos added. Just think about it. I'll think, I said. That's all. Sarah found the bakery on Pine Avenue. Boarded up. Busted windows. But solid bones. Owner was an older woman in Florida who didn't want to fly back for it. Said she'd lease cheap if someone could clean it out and make it presentable. We had it cleaned and staged in 4 days. I posted it to a couple local leasing boards. And by the 7th day, we had a tenant, a vegan cafe, paid 3 months down. When that first commission check from Riverside hit my hand, I didn't run around or scream. I just breathed. Full inhale, full exhale. It wasn't huge, but it was clean and it had my name on it. That night, I bought tacos for the crew. Aisha rolled her eyes when I said it was a celebration, but she still ate, too. Sarah and I sat in the truck again. Same coffee, same tacos, same cold night. She looked over and said, "So what is this?" I knew what she meant. "It's good," I said. "Yeah," she said. "It is." We didn't say more that night, but we both knew. After that, we didn't bother pretending. We were together. Not loud about it. Not mushy. Just solid. She didn't need saving. I didn't either. That's what made it work. I was sitting behind my desk at the Riverside office. Real glass door. Fresh paint. Logo etched in white. Telling myself for the 6th time that week I'd stop working Saturdays. I'm a liar about that. Always have been. The Henderson contracts were spread out in front of me. Tenant improvements, escrow clause, liability caps, stuff I knew like the back of my hand, but still double-checked. I was halfway through a revised clause when my phone buzzed. Text from Sarah. "You're still in that chair, aren't you? We're decorating for George's birthday. Move." Then came the honk. 3 short bursts outside the office window. Blue SUV, her signature move when I ignored her for more than an hour. I grabbed my jacket and headed out. Sarah rolled the window down just enough to say, "I swear, if I go into labor while you're reading about drywall codes, Then I'll name the baby plumbing wrench and never apologize," I said, climbing in. Her laugh still cracked the tension in my chest the way it did the first time. She was 8 months pregnant and still moving like a project manager with a deadline. One hand on the wheel, the other pointing out which houses along the way had awful paint jobs. We swung by the bakery to grab a lemon cake George liked and stopped at the corner store for 2 packs of streamers and a cheap plastic banner that said "Happy Birthday" in crooked, glittery letters. The mint green sweater she ordered last week was already wrapped in a box the size of a toolbox, at home. Cinnamon hit us in the face as soon as we walked through the door. George was in the kitchen, pretending not to notice the balloons we were blowing up behind him. He did that every year. Made a whole show of being surprised like he didn't help pick out the menu. I gave him a side hug while Sarah set down the cake. "You're really going to act like you didn't see the decorations sitting on the couch." "Don't ruin my moment," he said, deadpan, opening the fridge. "I've got at least 5 more fake surprises left in me." We set the table. George sliced the roast like a man doing brain surgery. Sarah arranged the dishes with that half-annoyed precision she used on everything. And I finally let the noise in my head go quiet. It was the kind of silence that didn't feel empty. It felt earned. We all sat down, and I got halfway through my first bite of pot roast when the doorbell rang. Sarah froze, fork in the air. I gave her a look. She gave one back that said, "It better not be work." I stood up, wiped my hands on a dish towel, and walked to the door already halfway annoyed. When I opened it, the air shifted. Margaret stood there, plastic box of grocery store chocolates in one hand, her other hand gripping her purse strap like it might rent. Her hair was pinned up tight. Her eyes were locked on the ground. "Happy birthday to your grandpa," she said. My jaw tensed without permission. I wanted to close the door or ask what the hell she was doing here after all these years, but it was George's day, and I wasn't about to turn it into a war. I stepped aside. "Don't make this about you," I said. "We're doing cake and dinner." "That's it." She nodded without looking at me and walked in quiet. She held the chocolate box like a peace offering no one had asked for. George turned from the sink when he heard her voice. But he didn't say anything, just gave her a look like he'd already played this scene out in his head 100 times and didn't love any version of it. Sarah moved like muscle memory, refilled George's drink, cleared the space at the far end of the table, gave Margaret a mug without speaking. The 3 of us had a rhythm now, and Margaret was just noise pressing up against it. We ate, sort of. George asked questions about the baby. Sarah teased him about needing to learn diaper duty. I chimed in with bad jokes about crib assembly. Every few minutes, Margaret would glance up like she wanted to speak, but didn't know how. When we lit the candles, George put on his fake surprise face and blew them out before we could even finish the song. "Well," he said, brushing crumbs from his beard, "guess I made it to 90. Must be the lemon cake." We laughed. Not loud, but real. After that, we all kind of agreed without saying it to move the real party to next month. Something about the air felt off, forced. Like we were all pretending it wasn't weird that the woman who threw me out showed up with a plastic smile and store-brand chocolate. I walked her to the door when it was time. "You picked a weird day to come," I said, keeping my voice level. "It's not about me," she said, still not meeting my eyes. "Good," I replied, "because it never should have been." She stood there for another second like she wanted me to ask her something. I didn't. I opened the door and she walked out without looking back. Inside. Sarah had already cleared the dishes. George was reclined in his chair, hand on his stomach, watching us like he'd seen the whole thing through a crystal ball. You handled that better than I would have, he said, half asleep. I shrugged. I wasn't going to let her ruin your birthday. He smiled without opening his eyes. That's the difference between me and you. I'd have let her ruin mine just to tell her off. I sat down next to Sarah and looked at her. Not because I needed comfort, but because I already had it. She didn't say a word, just reached over and squeezed my hand under the table. That was enough. She came back the next day. Sarah opened the door this time, and I heard the tone in her voice when she called to me. Neutral, tight, like she wasn't surprised, but still didn't like it. I came out of the office and saw Margaret sitting at the dining table like she was in a waiting room. Same purse, same boxy jacket from the night before. This time, she thanked Sarah for the coffee and actually looked at her when she said it. Sarah nodded once and sat beside me. George was across the table picking at leftover cake with the side of a fork. He didn't say a word. We tried to fill the air with something light. Talked about the band from last year's county fair. The one with the banjo guy who couldn't keep rhythm. George cracked a few half-decent jokes, and Margaret gave these stiff little laughs like she didn't remember how to do it right. Then she set the cup down, both hands still holding it. "I'm sorry," she said, voice thin, thinner than I ever remembered it being, "for the way I treated you, for how it began." Sarah didn't move, just kept her eyes on the table. I looked straight at Margaret and waited to see if she had the stomach to say more. She did. "I adopted you for the checks," she said fast like she was ripping off gauze. I told myself it was practical, that it made sense. And when the check stopped when you turned 18, I thought it was a decision due. That's what she said. A decision due. George's fork froze midair. Sarah's hand slid under the table and rested on my knee just once. No squeeze. Just enough to say, "I'm here if you need it." Margaret swallowed hard, but she didn't stop. "You have every right to hate me," she said. "I earned that." I didn't speak. I wasn't ready. And she knew that. She didn't try to fill the silence. Then she shifted in her seat, glanced at George like she needed permission, then turned back to me. "There's something else," she said. "I worked for your company for Spark Clean." I blinked. "What?" "For 4 weeks," she said. "I signed in as Tess, wore a hat, worked nights on a few warehouse jobs. I never looked up. I stared at her, and a chill moved through me in a slow, ugly wave. 6 years back, there'd been an extra name on payroll. Quiet woman, ball cap pulled low, never talked, just worked her shift and clocked out. I remembered thinking she looked familiar in the way someone might from an old photo, like a shape, not a person. "You were on my payroll," I said. "You mopped floors and took my checks. Why I wanted to see how you turned out," she said. "Wanted to know what kind of man you became. You could have just asked." She shook her head. "No. I didn't think you'd even let me in the door. And then I got scared you'd see me. That you'd know. So, I quit. I didn't know what to say. I was angry and hollow at the same time. Like I'd been picked apart while I wasn't looking." She looked down at her empty cup, then back at me. "There's more," she said. "About your brother." I stiffened. "What brother, Dylan?" "He's my son. Your half-brother. I never told him the truth until recently. He's been asking about you for years." "Years." She nodded. "I told him you left and never called. I didn't say why. I didn't want him blaming me." George let out a long breath. the kind that fills a room. He found out you own Riverside, she said. Saw your name on a lease agreement when he was helping a friend open a barber shop. He came home and said, "Is this the writer?" I couldn't lie anymore. And now he wants to meet. I said flat. No emotion, just a statement. She nodded. He asked if I could reach out. Said he's old enough now to know it wasn't your fault. I looked at Sarah, then at George, then back at Margaret. You got a picture? I asked. She pulled one from her purse and slid it across the table like it was an offering. I picked it up. Kid looked about 22. Broad shoulders, work boots, sharp jaw. He was leaning against a truck with a smile that didn't quite reach his eyes. Looked like someone who grew up guessing too much. I don't know if I'm ready to see you like a mom, I said. But I'm not built to hate forever. She nodded, eyes glassy. I won't forget, I said. But I'm not shutting the door on Dylan or on you. Not completely. Her voice cracked. That's more than I deserve. Yeah, I said, setting the photo down. It is. She stood up, gave a small nod to George, then to Sarah, then looked at me one last time like she wanted to hug me, but didn't dare desva kong dam. When the door closed behind her, the room stayed quiet for a long time. Finally, George said, you handled that with more grace than I'd have had. I'm not doing it for her. I said, I know. He said, you're doing it for the part of yourself that needed to hear it. Sarah leaned her head on my shoulder. I'm proud of you, she said. I nodded, still staring at the photo of a kid I'd never met, but somehow already cared about. Dylan showed up at my office on a Tuesday afternoon just after lunch. I'd been expecting him all day, but still flinched when I saw him through the glass door. He looked older than the photo. Maybe 23, maybe a rougher 25. Taller than me by an inch. Little scar on his chin. Like maybe he caught a cabinet edge or a punch he didn't duck in time. He had his hands in his hoodie pocket. And that look people get when they're walking into something big and don't know where to start. We stood there for a second. Then we both stepped forward at the same time. The hug wasn't awkward, but it wasn't smooth either. Like brothers who didn't grow up together, but still had the same blood underneath it. He clapped my back once like he was making sure I was real. I pointed to the conference table. Hope you like stale donuts. They've been here 3 days. He grinned, sat down. If there's sugar, I'll survive. We sat there with the box between us like it was some kind of truce offering. He looked down at the table, then at me. I saw what she did, what Frank did. I knew something wasn't right even back then. But I was just a kid. I didn't push back when I got older. I should have. I shook my head. You were a kid, Dylan. That's not on you. He nodded slow. Still, that still hit harder than I expected. It wasn't guilt. It was grief. Not the loud kind. The kind that gets wedged behind your ribs and never quite works its way out. He leaned back in his chair. I build cabinets now. Got a shop off Cedar Lane. Not fancy, but honest work. Mom told me you're having a kid. I nodded. Yeah. 8 weeks out. I'll build a crib if you'll let me, he said. No charge. Just let me do it. I can pay, I said. He shook his head. You can shut up in a nice way or I'll make it extra ugly on purpose. I laughed. Fair enough. It felt solid. Like maybe there was something to build here. Something more than blood and regret. Then the Harlan mess rolled back in. He'd been slow walking Spark Clean's renewal permits for months. Lost paperwork. Emails that mysteriously bounced back. inspections that got rescheduled without warning. I'd been logging every call since Sarah told me to start taping. 3 of those calls had Harlan fishing for cash. Never direct, but real slimy stuff like, "We could probably prioritize if we had some incentive," or "There's ways to make red tape disappear," if you get what I'm saying. I played one of the recordings for Sarah. She didn't flinch. "We need to catch him in person," she said. "Stage it. He'll push again. And if Carlos shows, that's confirmation." Carlos had been quiet lately. Too quiet. Then he texted me out of nowhere. "Carlos handled Harlan for you. My guy stepped in. Expect smooth sailing soon." The next morning, our fire inspection got bumped again with zero explanation. That told me all I needed. Sarah sat across from me, her notebook open, tapping her pen like a gavel. "We set up a meeting," she said. "Neutral ground. You invite Harlan to talk face to face. I show up on accident. Your phone records the whole thing. If Carlos walks in, 2, game over." We chose Charlie's Diner. Red booths, low ceilings, waitresses who called you honey, whether you were 80 or 18. I booked a corner booth, told Harlan I wanted to clear the air and streamline things. He showed up wearing the same smug look he always did, sat across from me, adjusted his cuffs like this was some business lunch. "Timelines are rough right now," he said. "But you know, certain priorities can be bumped if there's cooperation." My phone was under the napkin holder, screen black, recording clean audio. Cooperation meaning, he leaned in. "We both know what I mean. You scratch my back, I scratch yours. It's all part of the game." Then he slid an envelope across the table. I didn't touch it. "You're not subtle," I said. He smiled like I just complimented him. 2 minutes later, the bell above the diner door rang. Carlos walked in, scanned the place, and zeroed in on me. He strolled over like we were old college buddies, clapped my shoulder hard, and said, "Told you I could fix it. My guy's good. Right." I smiled like he hadn't just stepped in it. Harlan's expression didn't move, but I saw it. The twitch in his jaw, the way his eyes darted between us. He knew the mic was running. Too late. Sarah walked up like she just happened to be there, sat beside me and opened her planner. "Hope I'm not crashing anything," she said. Harlan stood up, muttered something about being late for another meeting, and bolted. Carlos asked if I wanted to grab a drink later. I didn't answer. Back at the office, I saved the audio to 3 separate drives. Sarah closed her laptop and looked at me across the desk. "Think they'll try to spin it?" "They'll try," I said. "But the mic doesn't lie." The next morning, I walked into Clara's office with the recording still hot on my phone. She took one look at my face and said, "Tell me you brought evidence." "I brought everything," I said, setting the flash drive on her desk. She slid it into her laptop, pressed play, and listened with the same cold satisfaction I'd seen from her in court once when she took apart a slum lord in less than 10 minutes. By the time Carlos's voice came in, "Told you I could fix it," she was grinning. "Harlan's toast," she said. "Carlos, too, if he's dumb enough to say one more word." We took it to the city's ethics board that same day. Clara laid it out like a prosecutor. Clear, calm, sharp, within 48 hours. Harlan was suspended pending investigation. When the board subpoenaed Carlos's texts and saw the thread confirming he'd handled it with his guy, his whole defense fell apart like wet cardboard. "We didn't leak anything, no social posts, no anonymous tips to reporters," Clara said. "Let the process work and keep your powder dry." So, I did. I kept working, kept breathing, While all that mess churned, something else landed on my desk. An anonymous tip came through one of our property alerts. I clicked it and sat back. Frank and Margaret were behind on property taxes again. Fourth lien in 5 years. This time it wasn't just late. It was bad. Compound interest, city fines, notices unopened. The county listed it for lien sale Tuesday 2 p.m. I didn't tell anyone. I put on a cap, sat in the back row of the hearing room, and let Riverside Holdings LLC make the bid. No questions, no noise. We got it. I could have pushed hard. Penalties, court summons, lockout notices. I could have turned the screws and never looked back. Instead, I asked Clara to draft a letter. One offer. No negotiation. The letter said, we'd forgive all penalties and release the lien completely if Frank and Margaret signed and delivered a written statement at a county foster support luncheon admitting they adopted for the checks and kicked me out the day those checks stopped. They had to read it aloud. One time in front of the people they owed it to. Clara stared at me after she wrote it. You want revenge or you want closure? She asked. Both, I said. But I'm doing it clean. A few days later, Margaret showed up at Sarah's office. I wasn't there, but I heard every word after. She walked in holding the letter like it had burned her fingers. Is he serious? She asked. Sarah didn't blink. Very. People will be there. Friends, neighbors. Sarah didn't flinch. Then tell the truth loud. The luncheon was small, maybe 50 people, social workers, case managers, some foster families, 2 pastors, a retired judge. Margaret wore black slacks and a too-tight blouse. Frank came in behind her, silent as a ghost. No tie, no handshake, just kept his eyes on the floor. They waited until that last speaker finished before Margaret stood. She walked to the front like someone walking into court, pulled a folded paper from her purse, hands shaking. She started reading. My name is Margaret. My husband and I adopted a boy named Ryder when he was 2. We did it for the checks. We told ourselves we were helping. We were not helping. When the support ended on his 18th birthday, we told him to leave. He had no warning, no money, no plan. That was our choice. And it was wrong. Her voice cracked halfway through. She kept going. Frank never looked up. She finished, folded the paper, and sat down. Nobody clapped. Nobody needed to. It wasn't a performance. I didn't stand. I didn't cry. I just sat there and felt something shift in my chest. It wasn't joy. It wasn't anger. It was a click. A clean, quiet click. Like a door I didn't know I was still holding shut. Finally closed. That afternoon, Clara filed the lien release. Everything was satisfied. Every cent. Every penalty. That night, I slept without clenching my jaw. First time in months. A few weeks later, Sarah's water broke a little after sunrise on a Wednesday. She was standing at the sink, brushing crumbs off a plate, when she turned and said, "Okay, it's time." George looked up from his newspaper like he'd been expecting it for weeks. He stood, stretched his back, and said, "I'll feed the cat," then sank into his favorite chair like a sentry guarding the fort. We got to the hospital in 25 minutes. I know because I counted every light we ran. I held Sarah's hand through check-in, through the epidural, through the real contractions that made her grab my wrist hard enough to leave a mark. I tried to keep it light, made dumb jokes about naming the baby after fast food or plumbers. But I could see it in her face. She didn't need my humor. She needed my voice. Steady, counting through the peaks and breathing with her. Our son came out mad at the room, red-faced, arms swinging, lungs ready to fight. He let out one solid yell, then went quiet the second they laid him on Sarah's chest. We named him Carter, George's middle name. Not fancy, not trendy, just strong. That night, Dylan showed up grinning, holding a blanket-wrapped bundle with 2 arms and a proud smile. Inside was a crib, real wood, hand-carved, no instructions needed. He carried it like a gift from one brother to another. "I didn't use glue," he said, "just pegs and stubbornness." He set it up in 25 minutes flat, humming the whole time like it was nothing. When he finished, he stepped back, clapped the side once, and said, "Your kid's going to sleep in style." I looked at the name, Carter, carved into the headboard like it had always been there. George came in behind us, leaned over the crib, and rested a hand on my shoulder. "You did fine, kid," he said. "That's the one I'll remember when I'm old." Not the awards, not the deals, not even the name on the office glass. That line from him. 2 weeks later, Harlan got canned. Ethics board made it official. Permanent disqualification. Public notice. Stripped title. He didn't even appeal. Just disappeared. Carlos tried to text like none of it mattered. Like we were still boys, and the whole thing was some misunderstanding. I let the message sit unread. Quiet was its own answer. A week after that, a card showed up. No name on the envelope. Just my first name in Margaret's handwriting. Inside. "Thank you for giving me a way to tell the truth. I didn't deserve it." That was all. No ask. No phone number. Just that. I read it once, then put it in a drawer with the rest of the things I don't burn or display. We hosted George's rescheduled 90th a month late. Weather was good, food was better, and the mint green sweater Sarah picked looked like it was made for him. Streamers drooped a little from the heat, but the table was full. Dylan cracking jokes, George pretending not to smile, Sarah bouncing Carter on her hip while yelling at me for cutting the roast uneven. When dessert came out, Sarah gave me the nod. I stood, grabbed the little black mic we kept from Spark Clean parties, and handed it to George. He cleared his throat and held it like a talk show guest. "This all started," he said, pointing toward the living room with a blue bungalow that looked like hell and a kid who refused to quit. Everyone laughed. George kept going. "I showed up one Saturday to help paint the trim. He handed me a can of Off-White and said, 'Don't drip on the windows.' I thought, hell, he doesn't even know what primer is." But he worked. That kid worked like every nail he drove was an apology to the world. He glanced over at me. "Some houses are just wood and paint, but some you build them because you know what it feels like not to have one." That hit me harder than I expected. I looked around the table. George, Sarah, Carter, Dylan grinning like a dope. I'd wanted revenge once, real sharp-edged justice, but what I got instead was better. I built a life so steady the people who broke me had to face it. And I didn't even have to raise my voice. Do you think Ryder handled Margaret the right way, or should he have cut her off for good? Leave your answer in the comments. And don't forget to like and subscribe for more stories like this. YouTube picked this for you. Tap it. Let's see if they guessed right.